അവിടുന്ന് മണ്ണിറങ്ങണമെങ്കിൽ എന്നോട് മാനസികമായിട്ടുള്ള
Hey everyone, it's Sam, and welcome back to the 911 Nonsense podcast. To stay in the loop, learn about upcoming guests, and join in the conversations with the Noon community, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And hey, if you like what you hear in this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to us. Christopher started his fire service career on September 11th, 2001, and the lessons began immediately. He shares how a quadruple fatality early in his career shaped the way he approaches hard calls, mental health, and longevity in EMS. We talk about cultural competence when serving Amish communities, the importance of family-centered care, and how maturity changes the way you practice medicine. He opens up about overcoming fear in pediatric emergencies, how a neonatal resuscitation course shifted his confidence, and why he's now focused on helping other providers lower their pucker factor. From pediatric readiness and conference stages to building real community online, this conversation is about growth, clinically, emotionally, and professionally. Let's get started. All right, Christopher, thank you so much for joining the Noon podcast. It's so great to have you out here today. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. And I've been looking forward to this since I joined TikTok. So here we are.
Heck yeah, man, that's awesome. I have so much love for the TikTok world.
Right?
Let me go ahead and get a introduction from you if you don't mind, Christopher.
Yeah. So my name's Christopher with the Blakery Content and Reducing the Pucker Factor podcast. And I have been, so this is year 25 for me as a first responder. And my first day at the fire department was September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had just finished EMT school and had already had things in work. And I joined a department at that time that was essentially volunteer, which grew into a full-time department over the years that I was there. And so I spent almost 15 years as a firefighter, EMT, and then firefighter paramedic. And the last four of that, I was also functioning as a pediatric flight medic. And I'm sure at some point we'll discuss how I got into pediatrics and why that was so important to me. But so I did that. And while I was doing that, I went through nursing school and ended up as a PICU nurse straight out of nursing school. I did that, and then I left and went to a adult facility that was on the west side of Cleveland, like right in the middle of everything, level one trauma center, and worked in their level one trauma ER. And then I went to surgical ICU and then ultimately got on as a flight nurse specialist with the flight program that was at that facility. And honestly, when I decided I want to be a nurse, like to go to nursing school, it was because I wanted to fly with that program. And they only fly nurse and advanced practice. So, like nurse practitioner or physician, they do not fly medics. So, I was like, I'm going to nursing school because I want to fly with this program. And somehow I ended up working for that program. And that's where I work currently.
That's awesome, dude. Holy smokes, what a goal.
Yeah.
So are you part-time with your flight team?
No, so we're full time, but we're a hospital based, so 36 hours is full time. So we do a 24 and a 12. And yeah.
That's wild, dude. That's a good shift. I do miss
Yeah.
my 24s a little bit because it was a 24 off 24 and then back for a 24 and then off for 5 days.
Okay.
I got a lot of shit done in that schedule.
Right.
Then I decided to go and be a supervisor in the ER. So now I work 3 to 4 days a week.
Yeah, that'll get you.
I actually really enjoy being a supervisor in the ER. It's opened my eyes up to a lot of things, and I've learned quite a lot in the last 6 months. So it's been a lot of fun. And there's no weather changes. I don't have to worry about weather changes. I don't have to worry about EMS crews being dicks. I mean, sometimes, but not as bad as they were,
Right.
especially traveling all over. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, the weather's a big deal. So my last shift, we spent probably an hour, hour and a half almost on a scene out in like blistering cold weather. And we landed in the middle of the highway, and we were just kind of standing there for a while waiting on them to extricate and do all the things. And yeah, it was a long cold experience.
Yeah, I bet. Do you keep gloves in your bag?
I do, yeah. I keep flight gloves, and I have my like a stocking cap,
Oh,
whatever, but
okay.
not
Yeah.
not a beanie, but like the old school full one
Yeah.
in my bag. Yeah,
That's awesome, dude.
yeah.
I definitely don't miss that.
It was cold. I there was a photographer that ended up on scene and got some like really good pictures, and I sent them to some people, and like the response was right away was like, "You look really cold out there."
Oh no. That's so cool that he just showed up. Does he do it like on Instagram or what?
I think it was like part of the news because it like we were it was on so many news channels because like we literally shut down the highway in both directions and landed in the middle of the highway. So in the county that we're in, that's a pretty big deal when that happens. So they showed up as part of. I think they just do like images for the news agencies, and so they ended up on Facebook, and so I snagged them off of there, and
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
yeah.
Is it a smaller county that you're in, or is it a bigger county?
So I mean, it's a decent size county, but it's a very rural, like farm and Amish community. And so like literally our air base, the airport is in the middle of like cornfields, like in the middle of nowhere.
That's
So
wild, dude.
yeah, but we end up getting, so we get the rural road accidents, we get the highway stuff, and then we get the like farm issues and
hmm
and those types of things. So we definitely do and see trauma for sure.
Is it a different response? Is it kind of like, so I'm going to compare that only because I don't understand. Is it similar to like a reservation? Like we have Native American reservations here, so there are different rules when you respond out there. Is it kind of the same where it's different when you're responding to like one of the Amish communities, or is it the same?
So yeah, so the challenge that we run into with Amish is they are self-pay. So they do not carry insurance at all. So like if you before you can transport them, they have to like call their elders and get approval to for that bill essentially to have their family member transferred by air. So like that is a collective decision that is
It is
made.
wild.
Yeah.
What if they say no?
Then they accept that and they look at it uh, you know, they look at end of life as a part of life and its natural progression, and that's just what happened, right?
Wow.
And they're very stoic, they're very strong, very keep to themselves, but yeah, so however, when the bill comes, they walk in and they pay cash and they pay the full amount, but they make those agreements ahead of time. Like you have to get it's a community pot essentially, and you have to get approval for that. They have to get approval for that.
That's not something I'd ever like thought about until you talked about it just now. And then like it's so crazy. That's what makes America great, right? Is that like all of the different cultures that we have here. So it's really good to know that as a culture response when you're responding to a 911 service. Is that something that they have figured out a lot of the time before you even get there, or is it something that's addressed when you land?
Yeah, that's typically so if we land at a scene, that's one thing versus like an interfacility transfer. If it's an interfacility transfer, they've typically worked that out ahead of time. If we land at a scene, it's kind of one of those like, you do what you need to do, and then they deal with the elders after the fact.
Hmm.
Because we've had some of that. They ride bicycles a lot, so there's a lot of like car versus pedestrians or car versus buggies, and so you just handle it, and then they deal with it after the fact. But yeah, the ones where it's like a questionable transfer, that's where they're like, we got to call the elders.
I couldn't even imagine. I am gonna have to do some research into that community. We don't have a big, I mean, we might have a bigger Amish community out here than I think we do, and we have a lot of cultural diversity out here. But that's an interesting one. I'm gonna have to do some research.
Yeah.
Is that mostly who you serve out there in your area, or do
No,
you?
no, they're a small piece of it.
Okay,
We do there's a smaller like independent hospital that's just only a couple miles from our airport. And we do a lot of interfacility transfers for them, taking them to a more appropriate facility.
sure.
A lot of strokes out of
Mm.
there that we'll take to a definitive care center. A few STEMIs here and there, but and then there's other hospitals staggered throughout that we support too, and then the scenes are we definitely do more scenes out of that station than the other, just because of proximity of where we're at, and it's
Sure.
longer transport times to the appropriate facility. So,
What's your average rotor time out there for calls?
yeah, so to get to the hospital that we service most frequently, it takes us longer to rotor up than it does to get there. It's literally only a couple minute flight to get there. But you know, a lot of our scenes, 10, 15 minutes.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
How, just to backtrack a little bit, how emotional were you on 9/11? If that was your first day, like what a first day, right?
Yeah, it was one of those. So I was working at Staples as a like electronics lead. I was like the lowest level supervisor at Staples. And
Random.
yeah, and I that's what I was doing, and we got word of what was happening, and there was a Damon's right next door. I don't know if people know what Damon's
I
is. It
don't know
was
what
an old
Damon's is.
so it in my area, it was a sports bar that had, you know, they had food and all that stuff, but they were known for they had like projector screens all over the place, like huge, massive screens everywhere. And we literally just went over there and sat and watched everything on all these massive screens and watched everything unfold. And then that night was my first night of training at the fire department. And so after the spending the day of watching all of that, and then going to the fire station and feeling my emotions was I felt very restricted because I was the new guy. I wasn't officially on yet. And they're talking about, listen, if they call for teams, if they, you know, if they call for volunteers to go and support and all that, and they were like passing around a sign up sheet of who's able to go and who's willing to do what, and I felt very restricted because I wasn't officially on, and so that was challenging in the moment. But I was in the same breath, I was like, what did I get into? What did I sign up for? Right? And you know, the last 25 years has proven that I signed up for the right thing. But in that moment, I was like, you know, I think the world changed for all of us that day, and
Hmm.
it was what does the future look like, and it's been very different ever since. But those were the two emotions I had. I felt very restricted because I was just starting, but I also felt like what am I doing?
Yeah.
Is it should I be signing up for this?
It's valid to feel that way, especially when it's your
Yeah.
first day.
And
Like,
I was 20.
yo,
Yeah.
yeah, you were a baby.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
And to backtrack that a little bit, I was a 20-year-old from a small-ish town. that grew up a church kid, and we'll say borderline naive, right? Like I was aware, but I was mostly naive. And then coming into adulthood and also the fire service at the same time. So I think that played a big role into the way that the fire service molded me into the person I am today versus who I was growing up, because those are two very different worlds, right? Of growing up as a church kid and then the fire service. Like those are two different worlds.
Very different worlds that don't often collide.
Correct.
That's okay though.
Yeah.
I think you came out okay. I'm just kidding, dude.
I'm in a good place today. We'll say
Good.
that.
Good.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that there's a pretty specific reason for going Pete's.
Yeah. So most people know me as the Blakery content or reducing the pucker factor. And the pucker factor came about because I experienced it. I was 20 something when I joined the fire department, and I didn't have kids. I didn't want kids. I didn't know how to talk to kids. And I was easily annoyed and frustrated by kids. And I had a couple peds calls at the fire department, and I was like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm not comfortable, right? And I think as a new paramedic, new-ish paramedic, I think oftentimes, and not everyone, but I think a lot of us can relate to that paragod syndrome, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a paramedic. I know everything. I
Yep.
I I know so much that you can't even fathom how much I know,
I
right?
can do
Like
anything.
right. Like and I think as a 20-year-old, 20 something, as a new paramedic, it was like, and the autonomy and the power that comes with that, you're just like, and that's where we talked, about the chip on your shoulder. And you walk into a nursing home and you're like, yeah, I do have a chip on my shoulder because I know what this patient should be getting and how they should be getting treated. But I'm not rationalizing that this patient that you just called me for is the only person that I need to pay attention to. And you're currently paying attention to 30 patients, right? Like, but back to the pediatric side of it is I had those calls where I had a couple peds calls where I showed up and I was like, oh, I don't like this feeling. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm not comfortable. So I just started taking every pediatric class that I could. And so I signed up to take NRP, the neonatal recess course. And there was a local hospital that was offering it. And I called them up and I was like, hey, I'd like to get into this class. And she was like, I have never had a paramedic take this class. She's like, I won't even charge you. She's like, I would just enjoy to have you in the class. And I was like, well, that's my price point. I'm in.
Okay.
Right? So I went and took this class, and they're talking about just craziness of, yeah, let's put this baby in a bag and let's do, like all these different things. And I was just like, I was blown away.
Hmm.
And I kid you not, within a week or two, I had my first delivery in the field. And we walk in, yeah, like, you know, I I often argue that things happen for a reason. Like I don't really buy into that. I will tell you though, there are a lot of moments in my life where you're like, it's hard to argue that. It's hard to dispute that, right? Like I
Yes.
don't really buy into that, but there's some times where it's just like, well, that played out perfectly, right? And this is one of those moments where it's like I went through this course, I learned this information that I clearly did not have before, and we had this delivery in the field, and we show up literally just as dad caught the baby. Mom, it was her, she was full term, all prenatal care. Mom thought she had to go to the bathroom. It was her second child. Went to the bathroom and out came a baby. And dad was in there and caught the baby. Like it was literally like we walk in and dad's holding baby and he's just frantic. Like,
Oh.
and so we were able to go in and very quickly determine that mom was healthy, baby was healthy, and we were able to clamp the cord. And we actually had dad come back in and cut the cord and be a part of that. And in that moment, I looked at my partner and I was like, I've got baby. Mom's all yours. Like I'm out. Like and never in my life would I have expected for that moment to happen. But for me to say like, yep, I've got baby, and I did, and I went out and I kept baby warm, and I comforted and did all the assessment stuff based off of everything that I just learned a week or two before. And I put this baby in a bag. It was full term, maybe not necessary, probably overreacting, but we showed up to that ER, and those ER nurses, they looked at the patient and then they looked at me and I was like waiting for it. And then you could just almost see them go, okay, all right. Like, because that baby did not show up cold. And that was the one thing that I like, if I walked away with anything from that class, it was like cold babies end up as dead babies. And that baby was going to be warm when I delivered or showed up to that ER. And that's what happened.
That's awesome, dude. Uh, that is crazy. And you can't argue that if you're barely just out of the class and getting a newborn baby right afterwards. Like, it's really funny when things like that happen.
Absolutely. And like I said, I was the 20 something year old that wanted absolutely nothing to do with kids and I felt uncomfortable with it. So I tried to educate myself and immediately was like, "Oh, here you go. Here's the real world." And it played out perfectly and that the I think, I don't know that I've ever said this, but like looking back, like I feel like the response that I got from that ER staff when I showed up with that child, I was like, yeah, that felt good, right? And now, like now, so that's what I maybe that's what drove me of like I now, focusing on pediatrics, but like eliminating that fear. And that's what I call that pucker factor, right? Of like when your butthole actually puckers because you're that
Hmm.
nervous, you're that uncomfortable. And I felt it. And now, like I said earlier, like I'm not gatekeeping anything. If I can reduce that fear for anybody else, I'm going to do it.
That's awesome. And that's for peds specifically, huh? Is it like a peds cardiology or peds pulmonary? Is there anything that you focus on or that you like what's your bread and butter?
No, I think it's peds readiness in general. And it is having the ability to prepare ahead of time. I am all about using resources. So that cognitive offload, how can you offload some of that stress, offload some of that thinking beforehand, and then be able to show up and provide that patient and that family because the family is just as important as that patient, a level of care in which they are expecting because they are expecting you to show up and treat their child at the same level that you treat adult patients every day as your normal bread and butter. They don't know that pediatrics is 6 to 13% of an agency's call volume. And for a lot of agencies, it's 1%. And that's for an agency. That's not the provider level. But people that call 911 don't know that. They expect you to show up and perform at the same level in which you do for adult patients that you deal with every single day. So my goal is to one, improve pediatric patient outcomes through pediatric readiness, but two, reduce that pucker factor for the provider. And then I guess three, ultimately, is reduce burnout because when you feel confident and you feel comfortable and you feel backed and have the right resources and tools and education, you feel more confident, you feel more successful. So that it's bigger than just focusing on pediatrics. Like there's a lot of pieces and parts to that that all benefit from being pediatric ready.
So why is this such a big deal for you? Like all pediatrics in general. And then why do you also go out of your way to include the family when a lot of people don't?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of my career what I call turfing the family, right? Nope, you can't ride with us. Nope, it's more convenient if you drive alone. Yeah, nope, I know better. I know more than you do, right? Like I spent a lot of my career doing that. And I think it goes back to my time in the PICU when I was there. So when you go from an EMS provider or a flight clinician where you're only dealing with a single patient for a short amount of time to an ICU where you're dealing with the same patient over and over and dealing with the family and the family interactions and the families at the bedside and I was exposed very early on in my nursing career to family-centered care. The expectation was we had 24-hour visitation time. The family was allowed at the bedside and they were only asked to leave the room for like sterile procedures or something of that sort. Otherwise, they were in the room. They were engaged, they were involved, they were included in rounds, the multidisciplinary rounds where the physician and respiratory and pharmacy and everybody was involved. And the family was involved in that too. So I got exposed to that very early on. And I think it built my comfort level. And like I said, my fear going into the PICU was that change. Once I got into the PICU, that was my favorite part. I loved having the same patient over and over and over. I enjoyed interacting with that family. And I got to a point where I felt so comfortable handling the sick pediatric patient in the ICU that the family was more of the patient than the patient was.
That's crazy.
And and in reality, that's the case that we often run into in EMS as well. When we get called out for these pediatric patients, they may not be that severe. It may be, and I say this often, where we get invited into very intimate situations with families. We get invited into new life, end of life, and everything in between. And for them, it's a pretty major day. For us, it's a Tuesday. And when you have a family member that calls in and says, with their critically ill child, calls in and says, "Oh, good, you're the nurse today. We're going to stay home with the other kiddos and spend a little bit more time with the other kiddos today, and we'll be up later today." Right? Like, that is huge.
That is huge.
That a family can trust you and be like, "Yep, we're not going to rush up there because we know our child is in good hands." And I joke because I had one patient very early on in my PICU days that I ended up almost every single shift for almost 4 months. I had the same patient.
That's crazy.
It was one of the sickest kiddos I've ever seen. And when I first got assigned to that room, I was like, wait, what? No, I'm not ready for that. And they're like, yes, you are. And we are here to support you. And I went in there and it got to the point that, and I joke all the time where I'm like, I knew if that kid farted sideways. I was able, like, I was so in tune with that patient that I knew all the subtleties. I knew when something was off. I was so in tune and I loved that feeling. And I loved being able to advocate for that patient. And I loved the very first time that I got to actually hold that kiddo as we transferred them to a different bed when they were getting transferred out of the ICU. Like this kiddo ended up with wounds all over because we could not move them. Like they literally sat in a certain position with the head of because they were that sick and they were that fragile. And to be able to pick this kiddo up for the first time, like out of bed with no ventilator and no drips, and be able to hold them, and like the parents snapped, they're like, we got to get a picture of this because it was, I had taken care of this kiddo for so long. And to be able to have that, and every once in a while, obviously that patient has a huge Facebook presence of her whole storyline and all that. And every once in a while, I'll be like, I'll log in and be like, I wonder how they're doing. And I'll get to see pictures of, and it's like unbelievable to see that. And that is what is so rewarding about pediatrics. And oftentimes people will ask, like, how do you do pediatrics? And when I have stories like that, it's like, how do you not? How do you not? Like, they are so resilient. They didn't cause, most of the time, they didn't cause what they're there for. And it's just the impact that you can have not only on that child, because a lot of those patients, they'll never remember you,
Yeah.
but that family will. That family absolutely will. And you can make or break their experience, their memories. And I could tell you story after story of interactions that I've had with parents that will live with me forever, of them telling me how my actions will live with them forever.
That's awesome, dude. That's such a cool story. That's crazy that you took care of him for 4 months. That's not, I couldn't even imagine. Like working in the ER, we get used to seeing the same people over and over again, and we do often board right now because there's no like beds upstairs. Not 4 months long though. It might be for an entire tour, but it's not going to be 4 months long. So that's crazy. Do you feel comfortable sharing any of your like one of your worst stories as a nurse or a paramedic since you were both?
Yeah, so I can give a couple. So one of the first ones that, again, I started out, I was in my 20s, and one of the first auto accidents I responded to was a quadruple fatality accident.
Oof.
And it was, they were all between the age of 20 and 24 or 26. So they were very close to my age. I didn't know any of them, but they were very close to my age. And it was still to this day probably one of the most gruesome scenes that I had seen. And I had no idea how to process what I was exposed to. And it was one of those that we showed up and there was nothing to do
Yeah.
because it was already to that point and that severe. And I think those are the cases that hit harder when you don't get to do your things and you don't get to try and you don't get to do put the efforts out there. So I think those cases hit harder. And this was one of the first fatalities and first accidents that I went to. And like I said, ended up being a quadruple fatality accident. And I really struggled with that. And I remember going back and I struggled for weeks, like minimum 2 weeks, where this call just sat very heavy with me. And I would go do things. I remember like Tony Hawk skating game had just come out. And when you crashed, there was like this very fake red smear across the screen. And I was like, I can't play this. Like the red smear was like it looked very fake, but it was very realistic to me in that
Sure.
moment. And I would do things and I remember I went and got in the shower and I was like, well, they're never going to do this again. And I would just go do simple actions and I was like, well, they're never going to do this again. And remind you, this was 2001, late 2001, early 2002 in the fire service, before mental health was a thing, before resiliency was a thing, before talking about things was a thing. And I remember talking to a colleague and I asked him, I was talking to him about it and I was told two things that have stuck with me and I've told this in every interview, every podcast, every interaction that I can get this out there. I keep saying this over and over, but I think these are so valuable. And again, these were told to me in late 2001, early 2002 is once you understand that you didn't cause it and you're just there to make that situation a little bit better. Okay. So once you can get that perspective of it's not your fault, but if you can do anything, you don't have to fix it all. But if you can make it a little bit better, you've accomplished something. Make that situation a little bit better for somebody. The other thing I was told was talk about it. Don't ever bury it down.
Mm-hmm.
The more you talk about it, the better you'll feel. And those are two things that I've kept with me my entire career. And I look back like, it's 2026 and everywhere you look, it's mental health, it's resiliency, it's talk about it. Let's get this, support, peer support, and CISM and all the things. And I'm like, yeah, I've been doing that since 2001. And this was a very rural volunteer department, right? Like, as most people will say, a jolly volley department. Like, that's where I started out, right? But that was wisdom that was passed on to me from someone from that department. And that has just carried with me through all of these years and has helped me, helped get me through.
Yeah, that's awesome. And great advice. I agree 100%. The more you talk about it, the more you're going to feel about it. But the faster you get it out of your system too, right? You're not holding on to it. You're not bundling it up. You're releasing it.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. And I'm so sorry that you had that experience because that's rough, especially when you're young, especially when you're that young too. And then you're seeing people that are very similar to your age. That can be hard. That's really hard. So I'm glad that you were able to, despite being at such a small department, that you had somebody that was able to help guide your mentality on it, right? Through the entirety of your career. That's awesome because not all departments are the same, right? And sometimes you can come up in a wrong fire department and that breeds bad culture.
Yep, absolutely. It's so amazing to me when I look back at where I started. And like I said, it was a very small department, but I look back and the people, and I look at where the people I worked with landed. And there are so many colleagues of mine from that department that have just done big things. Like they have achieved big roles and they while supporting that community and some of them still do that, but they have expanded into such bigger roles than that. And it's amazing the amount of knowledge and support and resources for not just that agency, but the surrounding agencies, the county, and even at the state level, that the impact that those providers have had. And I'm very fortunate for where I started and where I came from. Because, as you said, I think other departments, other neighboring departments, my outcome may have been very different.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. So where do you see the Blakery content going in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It started out as just educational videos, and it has changed course dramatically where I am currently doing more of this. More instead of me sitting in front of a camera and trying to record content and do videos, like if I had a budget and editors and all that stuff, like I would sit down and make a ton of content and education stuff, but I'm struggling with maintaining that. So I feel like it has shifted into this. And we alluded to a little bit the TikTok lives and live interaction and having these conversations with people on the fly in doing that. But it has also expanded into what doing that has allowed for me is to expand into conferences. So right now, the focus is I am traveling around. I'm doing more travel in 2026 than I have in many, many years, traveling to these conferences, and that is my goal. Is really right now is just spreading that awareness around reducing the pucker factor and increasing pediatric readiness. And right now, the shift is conferences and the podcast interviews and that. And I think as some of that, maybe if some of that slows back down, get back into the point to where I can continue to make content and videos and educational stuff that is a little bit longer lasting. I am working on some courses that I am building a family centered course for pre hospital providers.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so I joked, I don't know if you saw this, but I recently interviewed Dr. Antevi, and I joked with him because I was in the middle of building a pediatric readiness course, and Antevi came out with a pediatric readiness course. And I was like, all right, beat me to market. Like, that's fine. Like, I went and took the course, and I was like, it was one of those, like, you wanted to be frustrated because you're like, this is what I wanted to build. And then I watched it. And honestly, when I got to the end, I was like, well, I just got confirmation because everything I'm saying is what he just said in this course. And he is way bigger than I am. Right. And so then I was like, well, I'm gonna build this neonatal course because NRP is one thing, and it's designed for in the recess room and the warmers and all that stuff. But we deliver babies in the bathroom and in the house and in the ambulance. So I'm gonna do the neonatal. So Hand Heavy dropped his neonatal course,
No, dude.
and I was like, so I jokingly, because I interact with his staff and his secretary or administrative assistant and him, and so I jokingly made a comment on one of his posts, and I was like, "You beat me to market on peds, you beat me to market on neo. Can I please have family centered care? Can I have that one?" And his team responded right away. Was like, "Yep, absolutely. That's all yours. Let us know when you're ready, and we'll do a webinar, and we'll get you out there." Because
Oh, that's
it was at
awesome.
that point, and but I talked to him in the interview, and he's like, "I hope the things that we are talking about that you can educate other people with." He's like, "I'm not sure some of that stuff is teachable, but I hope that what you are explaining is achievable through that course." And he fully supported that. So that is one of the things I'm working on, is building courses that break down those big chunks of information and make them easily digestible, tricks of the trade. And that's what the webinar was today with EMS World, was taking the skills out of pals and pairs and making it easily digestible and tricks of the trade stuff. And that is my goal, is simplifying these things that feel complicated and making you realize they're not. If I can grasp it, if I can comprehend it, you'll be just fine. So that's where I'm going. Right now, the focus is conferences. The future is building some courses and just continuing to interact and grow and support up and coming providers. That's where I really hope the Blake Creek content is in the next 5 years, is just supporting those coming up that want to learn, that want to thrive, and want to grow. Because that I'll do all day, every day.
That's what makes long-lasting providers, man, is the when they have a willingness to grow and become better and to learn consistently, you have great providers that come out. All right, Christopher. Well, I want to give you 15 minutes to talk about anything else that you feel like we didn't talk about, or if you want to do any shout outs, this is your time.
Okay. Yeah, I think we covered the pediatric readiness side of it pretty well. I think as far as shout outs go, there's a lot of personal creators that I would love to shout out, but I feel like I would leave some of them out. So I think what I will address is the Medics After Dark Discord. And if you're not familiar, it's Discord. I'm old, so it took me a minute to realize what that meant. But essentially, what it is a community. And when I got on EMS or on TikTok and like EMS Talk, that's really what I was looking for was a community of EMS providers, of critical care providers, of flight providers that thought the same way I did and wanted to support each other. And that's what the Medics After Dark Discord is. There are providers in there that are students. There are providers in there that are EMTs, advanced paramedics, nurses, law enforcement, veterans. And it is just an environment of support and education and peer support. So there's different channels in there that you can go into. Like if you need peer support, somebody will log in with you and it's private and just those people that are in there and have be able to do peer support. They offer education. People volunteer their time, and there's a classroom where you go in and people will do a presentation. And what I did today for EMS World webinar, I've already done in Medics After Dark for anyone that wanted to log in. It's free. It's just supporting, like, hey, anyone want to do PEDS airway management? And they come in and they literally sit in there like a virtual class, and you go through your thing and then they ask questions and you support people and you build relationships. It it's phenomenal. Now there are some portions of it where you're like, you definitely have to put the notifications to silence, because there's a lot of interactions in there. It'll be overwhelming, but if you go in and you have a question, you'll get boom, 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 like immediate response, and just the networking and growth that has come out of that. So that would be the one shout out for me is the Medics After Dark. I randomly found them one night when I was on shift and couldn't sleep, and I literally have been like this ever since. I'm like, I'm in. So that's the one shout out. I think I've already alluded to Dr. Antevi and the Hantevi system. Obviously, I'm a huge fan there. EMS Connect, huge fan there. Flight Bridge Ed, phenomenal. I hear they have some really cool instructors. Uh, you know, so Flight Bridge Ed is phenomenal as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. Where can we find you?
So as far as the website goes, I think I secured the name and address, but it's not built yet. However, on all the social platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, are all under the Blakery content or reducing the pucker factor, which is the podcast.
Awesome. And do you feel comfortable if people that are listening reach out to ask questions or need anything?
Yes, absolutely. Please feel free. DM me, message me, email me. If I need to give you my email that you can share with people, I'm happy to do that as well. Like I said, I've given out my cell phone number more in the last year than I have ever, because I just want to be available. And I want people, when they're in that moment of uncomfortableness, to have a resource. And if I can be that resource, I'm happy to do so.
That's really awesome that you're willing to be so available for strangers, but I don't want you to forget to be available for yourself. It's very
Yes.
important.
That is something I very recently have figured out. I recently got to the point of my cup was full. It was There was no space left. And I was able to step away. I was able to do some self-care. I was able to do some mental health modalities, and I am redefined. I am in a new place.
Good.
I have the space to process and be present. So yes, I appreciate that comment, and I take it to heart because I very recently put myself first and did those things and took care of myself, and I'm a very good place moving forward.
Good. Just
Yeah.
don't forget it and use it
Yep.
when you need it.
Thank you so much.
You got it, Christopher. I appreciate you coming on today. It has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. I've enjoyed getting to know you and know your content and learn all of these cool new things. And I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the 911 Nonsense podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this since I joined TikTok. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, brother. I hope you have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show and want to show your support, be sure to check out the Noon merch store on Bonfire. Find the link in the description below. Also, if you have any guest suggestions or if you're interested in being a guest on Noon yourself, visit the website at www.samspursuit.com to get in touch.